Section 55 of Library of the World's Best Literature, Ancient and Modern, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Leonard Wilson. Library of the World's Best Literature, Ancient and Modern, Volume 2, Section 55, Excerpts from Aucassin and Nicollete by Frederick Morris Warren. Aucassin and Nicollete, 12th Century, by Frederick Morris Warren. This charming tale of medieval France has reached modern times in but one manuscript, which is now in the National Library at Paris. It gives us no hint as to the time and place of the author, but its linguistic forms would indicate for locality the borderland of Champagne and Picardy, while the fact that the verse of the story is in assonance would point to the later 12th century as the date of the original draft. It would thus be contemporaneous with the last poems of Chrétien de Troyes, 1170–80. The author was probably a minstrel by profession, but one of more than ordinary taste and talent. For, evidently skilled in both song and recitation, he so divided his narrative between poetry and prose that he gave himself ample opportunity to display his powers, while at the same time he retained more easily, by this variety, the attention of his audience. He calls his invention, if his invention it be, a song story. The subject he drew probably from reminiscences of the widely known story of Floire and Blanchefleur, reversing the parts, so that here it is the hero who is the Christian, while the heroine is a Saracen captive, baptized in her early years. The general outline of the plot also resembles indistinctly the plot of Floire and Blanchefleur, though its topography is somewhat indefinite, and a certain amount of absurd adventure in strange lands is interwoven with it. With these exceptions, however, few literary productions of the Middle Ages can rival Aucassin and Nicollete in graceful sentiment and sympathetic description. The Paris manuscript gives the music for the poetical parts, music that is little more than a modulation. There is a different notation for the first two lines, but for the other lines this notation is repeated in couplets, except that the last line of each song, or laisse, being a half-line, has a cadence of its own. The lines are all 7 syllables in length, save the final half-lines, and the assonance, which all but the half-lines observe, tend somewhat towards rhyme. The story begins with a song which serves as prologue, and then its prose takes up the narrative, telling how Aucassin, son of Garin, Count of Beaucaire, so loved Nicolette, a Saracen maiden who had been sold to the Viscount of Beaucaire, baptized and adopted by him, that he had forsaken knighthood and chivalry, and even refused to defend his father's territories against Count Bougard of Valence. Accordingly, his father ordered the Viscount to send away Nicolette, and he walled her up in a tower of his palace. Later Aucassin is imprisoned by his father, but Nicolette escapes, hears him lamenting in his cell, and comforts him until the warden on the tower warns her of the approach of the town watch. She flees to the forest outside the gates, and there, in order to test Aucassin's fidelity, builds a rustic tower. When he is released from prison, Aucassin hears from shepherd lads of Nicolette's hiding-place, and seeks her bower. The lovers, united, resolve to leave the country. They take ship, and are driven to the kingdom of Torelore, whose queen they find in childbed, while the king is with the army. After a 3 years' stay in Torelore, they are captured by Saracen pirates and separated. contrary winds blow Aucassin's boat to Beaucaire, where he succeeds to Guérin's estate, while Nicolette is carried to Carthage. The sight of the city reminds her that she is the daughter of its king, and a royal marriage is planned for her. But she avoids this by assuming a minstrel's garb and setting sail for Beaucaire. There, before Aucassin, she sings of her own adventures, and in due time makes herself known to him. Now, in one last strain, our storyteller celebrates the lovers' meeting, concluding with, "Our song story comes to an end, I know no more to tell." And thus he takes leave of the gentle and courageous maiden. The whole account of these trials and reunions does not occupy over 40 pages of the original French, which has been best edited by H. Suchet at Paderborn, 2nd edition, 1881. In 1878, A. Bida published, with illustrations, a modern French version of the story at Paris, accompanied by the original text and a preface by Gaston Paris. This version was translated into English by A. Rodney MacDonough under the title of The Lovers of Provence, Aucassin and Nicolette, New York, 1880. Additional illustrations by American artists found place in this edition. F. W. Bourdillon has published the original text and an English version, together with an exhaustive introduction, bibliography, notes, and glossary. London, 1887, and later in the same year Andrew Lang wrote out another translation, accompanied by an introduction and notes. Aucassin and Nicolette, London. The extracts given below are from Lang's version, with occasional slight alterations. F. M. Warren. "'Tis of Aucassin and Nicolette. Who would list to the good lay, Gladness of the captive gray? 'Tis how two young lovers met, Aucassin and Nicolette, of the pains the lover bore, and the perils he outwore, for the goodness and the grace of his love, so fair of face. Sweet the song, the story sweet, there is no man hearkens it, no man living 'neath the sun, so outwearied, so fordone, sick and woeful, worn and sad, but is healed, but is glad, 'tis so sweet. So say they, speak they, tell they the tale. How the Count Bougard of Valence made war on Count Guérin of Beaucaire, war so great, so marvellous, and so mortal, that never a day dawned but alway he was there, by the gates and walls and barriers of the town, with 100 knights and 10,000 men at arms, horsemen and footmen. So burned he the Count's land, and spoiled his country, and slew his men. Now the Count Guérin of Beaucaire was old and frail, and his good days were gone over. No heir had he, neither son nor daughter, save one young man only, such an one as I shall tell you. Aucassin was the name of the damoiseau. Fair was he, goodly and great, and featly fashioned of his body and limbs. His hair was yellow, in little curls, his eyes blue-gray and laughing, his face beautiful and shapely, his nose high and well set, and so richly seen was he in all things good, that in him was none evil at all. But so suddenly was he overtaken of love, who is a great master, that he would not of his will be a knight, nor take arms, nor follow tourneys, nor do whatsoever him beseemed. Therefore his father and mother said to him, Son, go take thine arms, mount thine horse, and hold thy land, and help thy men, for if they see thee among them, more stoutly will they keep in battle their lives and lands, and thine and mine. Father, answered Aucassin, what are you saying now? Never may God give me aught of my desire, if I be a knight, or mount my horse, or face stour and battle, wherein knights smite and are smitten again. unless thou give me Nicolette, my true love, that I love so well." "Son," said the father, "this may not be. Let Nicolette go. A slave girl is she, out of a strange land, and the Viscount of this town bought her of the Saracens, and carried her hither, and hath reared her, and had her christened, and made her his goddaughter, and one day will find a young man for her, to win her bread honourably. Herein hast thou naught to make nor mend. But if a wife thou wilt have, I will give thee the daughter of a king or a count. There is no man so rich in France, but if thou desire his daughter, thou shalt have her." "Faith, my father," said Aucassin, "tell me where is the place so high in all the world, that Nicolette, my sweet lady and love, would not grace it well. If she were Empress of Constantinople, or of Germany, or Queen of France or England, it were little enough for her. So gentle is she, and courteous, and debonair, and compact of all good qualities." Imprisonment of Nicolette. When Count Garin of Beaucaire knew that he would not avail to withdraw Aucassin his son from the love of Nicolette, he went to the Viscount of the city, who was his man, and spake to him, saying, "Sir Count, away with Nicolette, thy daughter in God. Cursed be the land whence she was brought into this country, for by reason of her do I lose Aucassin, that will neither be a knight, nor do aught of the things that fall to him to be done. And wit ye well," he said, "that if I might have her at my will, I would burn her in a fire, and yourself might well be sore adread." "Sir," said the Viscount, "this is grievous to me, that he comes and goes and hath speech with her. I had bought the maid at mine own charges, and nourished her, and baptized and made her my daughter in God. Yea, I would have given her to a young man that should win her bread honourably. With this had Aucassin thy son naught to make or mend. But sith it is thy will and thy pleasure, I will send her into that land and that country, where never will he see her with his eyes." "Have a heed to thyself," said the Count Garin, "thence might great evil come on thee." So parted they each from the other. Now the Viscount was a right rich man, so had he a rich palace, with a garden in face of it. In an upper chamber thereof he had Nicolette placed, with one old woman to keep her company, and in that chamber put bread and meat and wine, and such things as were needful. Then he had the door sealed, that none might come in or go forth, save that there was one window over against the garden, and quite strait, through which came to them a little air. Here singeth one: "Nicolette, as ye heard tell, prisoned is within a cell, that is painted wondrously with colours of a far country. At the window of marble wrought, there the maiden stood in thought, with straight brows and yellow hair, never saw ye fairer fair. On the wood she gazed below, and she saw the roses blow, heard the birds sing loud and low. Therefore spoke she wofully, Ah me, wherefore do I lie here in prison wrongfully? Aucassin, my love, my knight, am I not thy heart's delight? Thou that lovest me aright, 'tis for thee that I must dwell in this vaulted chamber cell, hard beset and all alone. By Our Lady Mary's Son, here no longer will I wonn, if I may flee. Aucassin and the Viscount. The Viscount speaks first. Plentiful lack of comfort hadst thou got thereby, for in hell would thy soul have lain while the world endures, and into Paradise wouldst thou have entered never. In Paradise what have I to win? Therein I seek not to enter, but only to have Nicolette, my sweet lady that I love so well. For into Paradise go none but such folk as I shall tell thee now. Thither go these same old priests, and halt old men and maimed, who all day and night cower continually before the altars, and in these old crypts, and such folks as wear old amices, and old clouted frocks, and naked folks and shoeless, and those covered with sores, who perish of hunger and thirst, and of cold, and of wretchedness. These be they that go into paradise. With them have I naught to make. But into hell would I fain go, for into hell fare the goodly clerks and goodly knights that fall in tourneys and great wars, and stout men at arms and the free men. With these would I liefly go, and thither pass the sweet ladies and courteous that have 2 lovers or 3, and their lords also thereto. Thither goes the gold and the silver, and fur of vair and fur of gris, and there too go the harpers and minstrels, and the kings of this world. With these I would gladly go. Let me but have with me Nicolette, my sweetest lady. Aucassin captures Count Bougars. The damoiseau was tall and strong, and the horse whereon he sat was right eager. And he laid hand to sword, and fell a-smiting to right and left, and smote through helm and nasal, and arm and clenched hand, making a murder about him, like a wild boar when hounds fall on him in the forest, even till he struck down 10 knights, and 7 he hurt. And straightway he hurled out of the press, and rode back again at full speed, sword in hand. Count Bougars of Valence heard it said that they were to hang Aucassin, his enemy. So he came into that place, and Aucassin was ware of him. He gat his sword into his hand, and struck at his helm with such a stroke that it drave it down on his head, and he, being stunned, fell grovelling. And Aucassin laid hands on him, and caught him by the nasal of his helmet, and gave him up to his father. "Father," quoth Aucassin, "lo, here is your mortal foe, who has so warred on you and done you such evil. Full 20 months did this war endure, and might not be ended by man." "Fair son," said his father, "thy feats of youth shouldst them do, and not seek after folly." "Father," said Aucassin, "sermon me no sermons, but fulfil my covenant." "Ha! What covenant, fair son?" "What, father, hast thou forgotten it? By mine own head, whosoever forgets, will I not forget it, so much it hath me at heart. Didst thou not covenant with me, when I took up arms, and went into the stour, that if God brought me back safe and sound, thou wouldst let me see Nicolette, my sweet lady, even so long that I might have of her 2 words or 3, and 1 kiss? So didst thou covenant, and my mind is that thou keep thy word." "Ay," quoth the father, "God forsake me when I keep this covenant. Nay, if she were here, I would have burned her in the fire, and thou thyself shouldst be sore adread." The lovers' meeting. Aucassin was cast into prison, as ye have heard tell, and Nicolette, of her part, was in the chamber. Now it was summer time, the month of May, when days are warm and long and clear, and the nights still and serene. Nicolette lay one night on her bed, and saw the moon shine clear through a window, and heard the nightingales sing in the garden, and she minded her of Aucassin her friend, whom she loved so well. Then fell she to thoughts of Count Garin of Beaucaire, that he hated her to death, and therefore deemed she that there she would no longer abide, for that if she were told of, and the Count knew where she lay, an ill death he would make her die. She saw that the old woman was sleeping who held her company. Then she arose, and clad her in a mantle of silk she had by her, very goodly, and took sheets of the bed and towels, and knotted one to the other, and made therewith a cord as long as she might, and knotted it to a pillar in the window, and let herself slip down into the garden. Then caught up her raiment in both hands, behind and before, and kilted up her kirtle, because of the dew that she saw lying deep on the grass, and so went on her way down through the garden. Her locks were yellow and curled, her eyes blue-gray and smiling, her face featly fashioned, the nose high and fairly set, the lips more red than cherry or rose in time of summer, her teeth white and small, and her breasts so firm that they bore up the folds of her bodice as they had been two walnuts. So slim was she in the waist that your two hands might have clipped her. And the daisy flowers that brake beneath her as she went tiptoe, and that bent above her instep, seemed black against her feet and ankles, so white was the maiden. She came to the postern gate, and unbarred it, and went out through the streets of Beaucaire, keeping always on the shadowy side, for the moon was shining right clear. And so wandered she till she came to the tower where her lover lay. The tower was flanked with pillars, and she cowered under one of them, wrapped in her mantle. Then thrust she her head through a crevice of the tower that was old and worn, and heard Aucassin, who was weeping within, and making dole and lament for the sweet friend he loved so well. And when she had listened to him some time, she began to say, here one singeth: Nicolette, the bright of brow, on a pillar leaned now. All Aucassin's wail did hear, for his love that was so dear. Then the maid spake low and clear: Gentle knight, withouten fear, little good befalleth thee, little help of sigh or tear. Ne'er shalt thou have joy of me, never shalt thou win me, still am I held in evil will of thy father and thy kin. Therefore must I cross the sea, and another land must win. Then she cut her curls of gold, cast them in the dungeon hold. Aucassin doth clasp them there, kisseth the curls that were so fair, them doth in his bosom bear. Then he wept e'en as of old, all for his love. Thus say they, speak they, tell they the tale. When Aucassin heard Nicolette say that she would pass into a far country, he was all in wrath. Fair sweet friend, quoth he, thou shalt not go, for then wouldst thou be my death. And the first man that saw thee, and had the might withal, would take thee straightway into his bed, to be his leman. And once thou earnest into a man's bed, and that bed not mine, wit ye well that I would not tarry till I had found a knife to pierce my heart and slay myself. Nay, verily, wait so long I would not, but would hurl myself so far as I might see a wall or a black stone, and I would dash my head against it so mightily that the eyes would start and my brain burst. Rather would I die, even such a death, than know that thou hadst lain in a man's bed, and that bed not mine. Aucassin, she said, I trow thou lovest me not as much as thou sayest, but I love thee more than thou lovest me. Ah, fair sweet friend, said Aucassin, it may not be that thou shouldest love me even as I love thee. Woman may not love man as man loves woman, for a woman's love lies in her eye, and the bud of her breast, and her foot's tiptoe. But the love of a man is in his heart planted, whence it can never issue forth and pass away. Now when Aucassin and Nicolette were holding this parley together, the town's watchmen were coming down a street, with swords drawn beneath their cloaks, for Count Garin had charged them that if they could take her, they should slay her. But the sentinel that was on the tower saw them coming, and heard them speaking of Nicolette as they went, and threatening to slay her. God, quoth he, this were great pity to slay so fair a maid. Right great charity it were if I could say aught to her, and they perceive it not, and she should be on her guard against them. For if they slay her, then were Aucassin, my damoiseau, dead, and that were great pity. Here one singeth: Valiant was the sentinel, courteous, kind, and practised well. so a song did sing and tell of the peril that befell. Maiden fair that lingerest here, gentle maid of merry cheer, hair of gold and eyes as clear as the water in a mere, thou, meseems, hast spoken word to thy lover and thy lord, that would die for thee his dear. Now beware the ill accord of the cloaked men of the sword. These have sworn and kept their word they will put thee to the sword, save thou take heed. Nicolette builds her lodge. Nicolette, the bright of brow, from the shepherds doth she pass, all below the blossomed bough, where an ancient way there was, overgrown and choked with grass, till she found the cross-roads where 7 paths do all way fare. Then she deemeth she will try, should her lover pass thereby, if he love her loyally. So she gathered white lilies, oak leaf that in greenwood is, leaves of many a branch, y-wis, therewith built a lodge of green, goodlier was never seen. Swore by God who may not lie, if my love the lodge should spy, he will rest awhile thereby, if he love me loyally. Thus his faith she deemed to try. Or I love him not I, nor he loves me. Aucassin, seeking Nicolette, comes upon a cowherd. Aucassin fared through the forest from path to path after Nicolette, and his horse bare him furiously. Think ye not that the thorns him spared, nor the briars, nay, not so, but tear his raiment, that scarce a knot might be tied with the soundest part thereof, and the blood spurted from his arms and flanks and legs in 40 places, or 30, so that behind the child men might follow on the track of his blood in the grass. But so much he went in thoughts of Nicolette, his lady sweet, that he felt no pain nor torment, and all the day hurled through the forest in this fashion, nor heard no word of her. And when he saw vespers draw nigh, he began to weep for that he found her not. All down an old road and grass-grown he fared, when anon, looking along the way before him, he saw such an one as I shall tell you. Tall was he and great of growth, ugly and hideous, his head huge and blacker than charcoal, and more than the breadth of a hand between his 2 eyes, and he had great cheeks, and a big nose and flat, big nostrils and wide, and thick lips redder than steak, and great teeth yellow and ugly, and he was shod with hosen and shoon of oxhide, bound with cords of bark up over the knee, and all about him a great cloak twofold, and he leaned upon a grievous cudgel. And Aucassin came unto him, and was afraid when he beheld him. Aucassin finds Nicolette's lodge. So they parted from each other, and Aucassin rode on. The night was fair and still, and so long he went that he came to the lodge of boughs that Nicolette had builded and woven within and without, over and under, with flowers, and it was the fairest lodge that might be seen. When Aucassin was ware of it, he stopped suddenly, and the light of the moon fell therein. Forsooth, quoth Aucassin, here was Nicolette, my sweet lady, and this lodge builded she with her fair hands. For the sweetness of it, and for love of her, will I now alight, and rest here this night long. He drew forth his foot from the stirrup to alight, and the steed was great and tall. He dreamed so much on Nicolette, his right sweet friend, that he fell heavily upon a stone, and drave his shoulder out of its place. Then knew he that he was hurt sore. Ne'theless he bore him with that force he might, and fastened his horse with the other hand to a thorn. Then turned he on his side, and crept backwise into the lodge of boughs. And he looked through a gap in the lodge, and saw the stars in heaven, and one that was brighter than the rest. So began he to say. Here one singeth: Star that I from far behold, star the moon calls to her fold, Nicolette with thee doth dwell, my sweet love with locks of gold. God would have her dwell afar, dwell with him for evening star. Would to God, whate'er befell, would that with her I might dwell. I would clip her close and straight. Nay, were I of much estate, some king's son desirable, worthy she to be my mate, me to kiss and clip me well, sister, sweet friend. So speak they, say they, tell they the tale. When Nicolette heard Aucassin, she came to him, for she was not far away. She passed within the lodge, and threw her arms about his neck, clipped him and kissed him. Fair sweet friend, welcome be thou, and thou, fair sweet love, be thou welcome. So either kissed and clipped the other, and fair joy was them between. Ha, sweet love, quoth Aucassin, but now was I sore hurt, and my shoulder wried. But I take no heed of it, nor have no hurt therefrom, since I have thee. Right so felt she his shoulder, and found it was wried from its place. And she so handled it with her white hands, and so wrought in her surgery, that by God's will, who loveth lovers, it went back into its place. Then took she flowers and fresh grass, and leaves green, and bound them on the hurt with a strip of her smock, and he was all healed. Nicolette sails to Carthage. When all they of the court heard her speak thus, that she was daughter to the king of Carthage, they knew well that she spake truly. So made they great joy of her, and led her to the castle with great honour, as a king's daughter. And they would have given her to her lord, a king of Paynim, but she had no mind to marry. There dwelt she 3 days or 4, and she considered by what device she might seek far Aucassin. Then she got her a viol, and learned to play on it, till they would have married her one day to a rich king of Paynim, and she stole forth by night, and came to the seaport, and dwelt with a poor woman thereby. Then took she a certain herb, and therewith smeared her head and her face, till she was all brown and stained. And she had a coat and mantle and smock, and breeches made, and attired herself as if she had been a minstrel. So took she the viol, and went to a mariner, and so wrought on him that he took her aboard his vessel. Then hoisted they sail, and fared on the high seas, even till they came to the land of Provence. And Nicolette went forth, and took the viol, and went playing through all the country, even till she came to the castle of Beaucaire, where Aucassin was. Here singeth one. At Beaucaire below the tower sat Aucassin on an hour, heard the bird and watched the flower, with his barons him beside. Then came on him in that tide the sweet influence of love, and the memory thereof, thought of Nicolette the fair, and the dainty face of her he had loved so many years. Then was he in dule and tears. Even then came Nicolette, on the stair a foot she set, and she drew the viol bow o'er the strings, and chanted so: Listen, lords and knights, to me, lords of high or low degree, to my story list will ye all of Aucassin and her that was Nicolette the fair. And their love was long to tell, deep woods through he sought her well. Paynims took them on a day in Torelore, and bound they lay. Of Aucassin naught know we, but fair Nicolette the free now in Carthage doth she dwell. There her father loves her well, who is king of that country. Her a husband hath he found, Paynim lord that serves Mahound. Ne'er with him the maid will go, for she loves a damoiseau. Aucassin, that ye may know, swears to God that never mo with a lover will she go, save with him she loveth so in long desire. End of Section 55. Recording by Leonard Wilson of Springfield, Ohio.